Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second Foodbuy Futures event. For those of you who aren't aware, Foodbuy Futures is all about bringing together industry experts to discuss key industry topics right now. And today's topic, consumer confidence and social distancing, couldn't be more at the front of everyone's mind as businesses start to reopen following COVID-19. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Bill Randles, National Account Director for Costcutter, John Blewett, Sales Director for Havelok, Catherine Pegna, Managing Director for GB Health, Denise Starforth, Associate Director on the go from Coca European Enterprises, and Sophie Daniels, Category Director for Retail at Foodbuy. So thank you all for joining. I'm now going to hand over to Sophie to set the scene from a supplier perspective around consumer confidence and social distancing. And from there, we'll build in some discussion. So over to you, Sophie.
Hi everyone, thanks Ben. I'm really excited about our panel discussion this afternoon. Consumers really are at the heart of everything that Foodbuy and our clients do. And without them, quite simply, we have no sales. So it's really important that we face into how we make sure our consumers have the confidence to visit, shop, eat and drink in our client sites. So we know that consumer confidence is really low right now. Nearly 50% of consumers are very or somewhat scared that they'll contract COVID-19. So if we do want our consumers back, we need to make them feel safe and embrace the new normal. It's very clear that safety of consumers needs to be the priority to help increase confidence. But there are many areas within that can help. So reviewing the food and drink offer, we're seeing a much greater focus and requirement for wrapped and food to go products. Secondly, clear communication with consumers is absolutely key. Embracing the use of digital innovation and technology has a really big role to play. And we know as consumers ourselves that we're still looking for those really enjoyable experiences. So we need to ensure the personality of operators still comes through the PPE, masks and screens, and that they don't create barriers. So there's a lot that we can learn from our partners, which our panelists will bring to life and share, that I'm sure will give lots of food for thought in navigating the new normal with our consumers. That's it from me. Ben, back over to you.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I think great scene setting. Thank you. I think we've seen a lot of coverage in the media around what the new normal is going to look like, and we've already started seeing some of the high street chains reopen, and I think the 4th of July is still signalled for a lot in terms of how that is a key date in everyone's diary. So I suppose, Bill, can I come to you in the first instance? You've kept a number of your stores open over the past few months, and you're working to reopen others at the moment too. I suppose, what can you tell us about your experiences from the high street? And are you keeping consumers safe, I suppose, is the initial question.
Yeah, so thanks, Ben. I guess the vast majority of our stores have remained open. So we work in convenience retail. So we are lucky or challenged in different, depends which way you look at it, in the way that we've experienced this whole process from the start and all the way through it. So I thought I'd just summarise what's happened to consumer behaviour, and that kind of flows into then how do we keep colleagues and consumers safe. So we saw over a period of 2 or 3 weeks kind of swings in consumer behaviour you'd never really envisaged. So we saw at the peak of panic buying, transactions increased by 30-40% and basket size shot up to 50, 60, 100% plus. The supply chain was wiped out. Lockdown came along and then transactions crashed. So they went down to 50%. So we saw a 50% drop from norm from a 40% increase from norm. So massive change in transaction levels. Basket size continued to stay at 100% of what it was previously. So sales have been really strong from day one. And what we've seen every single week has been consumer behaviour changing. So there is no new norm. So every week is different. So the new norm is that it's going to keep changing, and we don't really see it slowing down. So transactions are almost back to where they were. Basket size is still 50% higher than it was. So from a customer behaviour point of view, we've absolutely focused on the safety message, and we've focused to help the consumer feel safe, we have to start with colleagues. So a lot of our focus has been on the way that we've kept our colleagues safe. And we'll talk about the layout of the store, I guess, later on. But the key things are, PPE, etc. Following government advice is not necessary, but psychologically they want it in the back of house. So even though we've provided it, we've recommended not using it, and that's helped psychologically. The one thing that we've done, which is absolutely critical, is permanent screens across the counter. So we put temporary ones in, and it just didn't do the job. It annoyed customers and it annoyed colleagues. They didn't feel safe. When we put permanent screens in, our engagement scores went through the roof. They've never been higher. So if I was to summarise, permanent screens, don't scrimp on it, focus on your colleagues, and that then flows through into the consumer.
Yeah, that's really insightful. So I suppose we've seen over the course of the last few weeks globally the remobilisation from other countries. Denise, Coca-Cola is obviously a global brand. Are you seeing anything from other countries that would build on what Bill's just discussed from Costcutter?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think obviously we're talking to our different counterparts in different countries all the time, and I think it's very pertinent to what Bill was saying there in terms of it's constantly changing and it's constantly evolving, so you have to keep this connection up. If we look to kind of what we're hearing and experiencing from kind of the global economics, if you like, everyone is experiencing the decrease in their income. 57% of the people who are actually in China have expressed that they've had a decline in their income and it's been impacted. And you look at a third of the whole of Europe, they're concerned about their economic future. And right now in GB, a third of people aren't at work. And that's obviously something that's impacting the way in which people are approaching. However, on the upside of that, we're also seeing that 86% of people are kind of ready to go out, and they're missing eating out, and they're ready for whatever the new norm brings them. However, what we've also learned is that we've all approached it in a very, very similar way. It's all about kind of recovery, how we sustain, but then also how we strengthen and move on from there. And that's probably been a framework that quite a lot of countries have followed. But really being agile, adaptable and flexible is coming through massively. At the heart of what people are hearing, it's obviously increased sensitivity to health and safety. Consumers are actually looking for clear direction. They want to be told which way they've got to turn when they walk into a store. They want to feel safe. So really they're looking for confidence in that each of the different environments are actually addressing any hygiene factors and it's being prioritised. But most importantly, and again, as to what Sophie said earlier, they don't really want to have the experience massively compromised. So we still want it to be very much touch points with whoever's serving them. Affordability and value for money is also key. However, at this point, it's clear to express affordability doesn't mean cheapest. What it means is that it's perceived value for the consumers. And then when you look at other markets in terms of what they're experiencing, so the US and China are kind of some of the first markets to evolve out of this. And again, health and safety paramount, building consumer confidence is key. PPE and the thermo testing has been absolutely critical in giving the people the confidence to go back into the environments. So when you look at the US, they're experiencing about 60% of people returning into those environments, but social distancing is absolutely paramount. And also the way in which people are actually being served. So for example, not having their own vessels, if it's a refill model, that it's a new cup every time, no self-serve. And that's absolutely paramount because you're actually helping the queuing and you're not making people queue up for things. So there's no self-serve. And also that people have got evolving business models, which is highly driven by digital. So ramped up in delivery, curbside pickups in the US, and simplified menus. And interestingly, when you actually look at coffee shops, whilst the restaurants and things have opened up in the US, coffee shops are still only doing drive-through and takeaway and no sit-in, which is interesting. And that kind of demonstrates probably a way in which we'll evolve in the GB market. When you look to China, 48% people have actually visited on premise at this moment in time, and 55% have done so more than 3 times since they raised the restrictions. Top 3 factors that are coming out, again, temperature checks. fewer tables and chairs, the greater social distancing measures, and that staff are wearing PPE, again, just giving the consumers the confidence when they go into those environments. Interestingly, Spain is probably one of the markets that's slightly different. And in that, whilst they want the safety measures in place, they don't want this experience to be compromised. Sharing is massive to the way in which they approach their eating out market. So therefore, they don't want to be able to have the sharing compromised, and that's very important. And then also the growth of digital. So with that is the ability to pre-order and but also have that interaction. So there's three things that we're kind of learning that comes in and flows out from what Bill was saying, as well as health and safety with PPE and clear direction, digital to increase that frictionless experience, value for money, but most importantly that people are being agile and adaptable as it evolves.
Brilliant. And I think the thing that came clear through to me when you were talking then is that I suppose confidence comes from people knowing what they know, and also that safety element being a big factor of how do we try and ensure that the consumer experience doesn't change as much as probably we think it needs to build that confidence.
Yeah.
So to that point, Bill, what have you been doing around the Costcutter stores, around queuing, one-way systems? How have you found it? Have you had struggle in terms of trying to keep the norm for the consumer?
So a speed of transit is absolutely everything that we're focusing on. So if we think about how you get people in and out as quickly as possible, because that reduces the queue, and the number of people in the store is obviously dictated by the space you've got, but also the layout of the store. So if we think about in process, we've decluttered stores, we've simplified ranges to increase the speed of decision making. So things like food to go fixtures, which are generally quite complex and a lot of SKUs and multiple cross-category promotions. So we've simplified all of that fixture, new point of sale, new stripping, new layouts to meet changing customer needs, because it's changed from week to week. So we don't want people to be standing, blocking an aisle, doing what you'd normally expect them or want them to do, which is kind of pick and choose. You need them to go 1, 2, 3, move on. We've had kind of started to remove things like shippers and dump bins, all those upsell opportunities, which we all like, and from a supply point of view helps. And from our perspective, from a baskets point of view, really helps. They just get in the way. And then you end up with barriers and blockages in the store where you may think I've got plenty of space, but now I've got 2 people going too narrow around the aisle. So decluttering is important, and the same at the till, whereas previously you may have had more impulse at the till. We've stripped that right back so that it's just a simple into the till and out again. Even things like where you've got multiple uses in the store. So we've got post offices and retail in the same place. So typically a post office transaction takes a lot longer than a convenience transaction. So what we were finding where we had one queue or one set of people in the store was everybody was queuing for the post office and nobody was buying anything from the store because we couldn't get enough people in the shop. So we started to think about, do we need 2 queues depending on the mission and depending on the objective of the consumer. And then we're continuing to think about how do we implement technology, so self-scans and frictionless, for example, which I guess we'll talk about later as well. And then one-way systems sound really simple. When you've got a small shop with 3 aisles, you end up with everybody ending up in the corner. It's like, again, a Pac-Man. Everyone's ended up in the corner and then they're all turning around. And so it sounds simple. It's not as simple as you think. And the other thing, which is really important to think about, is when we first started it, because everyone's done at pace. So we said, how much space do we have? How many linear meters? How many people could we put in at 2 meters? That was the recommendation. That's what we did. Reality is people move. All right, now we need to reduce the number of people because people are moving. And then we implemented that. And then somebody said, yeah, but we've got colleagues in the store as well. Don't forget the colleagues. And that's one of the really interesting things about consumer behavior, is that they don't see colleagues as a person, they see them as a fixture. So the social distancing applies to customers, but not to colleagues. So you need to work really, really hard on that, which means closing aisles for replen, or even closing shops. We've got small shops, we just started to close them because it's just too complicated to have people in. It causes aggregation and friction. So those are the kind of main things that we've changed.
Yeah, I'm one of the packmen, I'm afraid. I'm really struggling to look down and follow arrows on the stall, so I do know that frustration. I suppose coming to you, Catherine, how have GV Health helped businesses to ensure safe, secure and hygienic spaces, to follow on from Bill's point there?
Right, well, it is, as Bill said, there are a lot of things that hit you, a lot of challenges, and actually out in the media there's an awful lot of different conflicting guidelines on what you should and shouldn't have. There is no one blanket approach, but what we try to sort of advise is that actually everybody takes it back down to basics. So you've got 4 key principles. First is the surfaces, identifying areas which have high contact and establishing a deep clean plan, how frequently these are going to be carried out. Second is personal hygiene, obviously access to hand washing, routes to and from obviously toilet doors, access to hand sanitizers. The third being spatial and social distancing, which you've also touched on, Bill. The schools have found that where they're trying to use the space, the greater use of the schools, so you're using more of the space, but flow of footfall, where you've got single flow spaces, narrow walkways, as you've said, in some cases it's not feasible, but wherever possible, use different entrances and exits. And the screens and the physical barriers which you have for such as checkouts or kiosks are very key, as you've also mentioned. When those 3 are established, you then get to a point where you can then sort of decide the level of PPE that's required for staff. And of course, we have to be quite careful, because the higher the level of PPE, the more important it is to make sure that your staff know how to put them on and take it off, because actually that's where the highest risk of error can come, which we saw in the Ebola outbreaks. But again, the key principles, if you keep coming back to those 4 key principles, they can be adapted to each of your sites. Bill, you mentioned that in some cases it isn't feasible, but I think having a run through, both from the point of view of the consumer, the customer and the member of staff is vital, because you can test the system and see if you get the Pac-Man situation, or whether, if there's going to be a blockage where you hadn't perceived, as you say, how you see staff as being not movable. But I think that also that just makes the consumer feel more confident, and the staff feel safe, because they've practiced it and they know what they're doing. So I think that's quite vital.
That's exactly my point, which is on paper it seems great, in practice it's not. You need to be engaging with your colleagues on a regular basis to make sure it's fit for purpose, which may mean changing flows or changing hours or opening gaps. I thought exactly that. Yeah,
no, thanks for that. I suppose I'd just like to change tack slightly. I think we've really covered off kind of the front of house consumer experience. But I suppose there's a wider implication around all of this to the wider supply chain. So, John, if it's all right, I'd quite like to come to you to understand from kind of back of house supply chain perspective, what are you Havelok doing to ensure that the products you're producing, the clean hygiene and that consumer confidence flowing through to the front of the store from that perspective.
Yeah, well, being a food manufacturer per se, I mean, we currently, before COVID-19, producing around 100 tonne of fish a week with 100 staff on 4 shifts. Now our sales dropped by 95% initially. We're back up to 25%. So at the moment we have around 25% of the staff back into the factory. But being a food processor as we are anyway, we've got gate processes through our business, hand washing, sanitising. We do that as a matter of course. PPE is all matter of course for our food standard agency. So the big change we've had to make, obviously because we're using less people anyway, but changing break times, changing start times, staggering break times, so we're not having a collective of people in one area at one time. That's been the biggest change. All the staff wearing visors with their names on, because similar to what Bill was saying, when you're working in store, these people work together day in, day out, and there's a lot of camaraderie. Once you put PPE onto someone's face, you're taking away that personnel element, and that's been quite a change for our staff. And as business builds up, and as we build up to, for our sector really, is schools and the pub sector, is to is really build in these factors and whatever the new norm's going to be in factories. So it's not been a massive change, but it's small step changes that we've worked with, and we sit down with our staff on a weekly basis in a committee just to make sure that they're quite happy with what they're seeing as well, and they feel safe in that environment as well. Because there's a lot of challenges, as we know, in food production as well, because they're having to work closely together. But what we've done is reduce our throughputs to allow everybody to do that as we get back to something what's quite normal, which we don't know where that is at the moment.
Yeah, and has the reaction from the staff been a positive one? Do they see it as a positive move that they're having to wear all the PPE, or is there a novelty element to it? Is it a bit of both? Is it still too early to call?
Well, it's been positive. I mean, we had all the staff furloughed for 12 weeks, and then we started to gradually get them back. And I think with them watching the media, I think it really geared them up for coming back into the work environment. So the ours as a collective have worked very well together and understand the importance of wearing PPE, and as they have to wear anyway, but it's just the extra measures that we've put in place. So that's why we have the works committee once a week, just to ensure that their staff are still happy, they're still happy with how everything's going, and also brings anything to light during the workday that we may not have thought of.
Brilliant. And Bill, I suppose from a communication perspective, that must be pretty critical in terms of the front of store experience for consumers, but also staff. Have you seen some good communication strategies, stuff that you can touch on?
Yeah, absolutely. So as things change, your classic crisis management is regular communication 2 ways. So I was kind of thinking about this, about how we've approached it. So there's probably 3 elements. Firstly, about consumers. So how we communicated to the consumers what they need to do in store. So when we first started, it was factual. It was social distancing, follow the arrows. It was basic factual stuff. We increased our frequency of colleague communication 2 ways. So we usually have got a hierarchical. So we hear store managers, area managers, etc., right up to me, and then all the way back down again. We cut straight through that. So we used the same hierarchical, but then we went straight to colleagues. So we've increased the frequency of colleagues to senior management conversations, which has been really important. And what they were telling us was factual side of it was great, and the majority of customers behave in a responsible way. But you've got a minority of people who will not come only once a week, or they'll come 3 or 4 times a day for non-essential items. They won't respect social distancing, they won't respect colleagues, and they don't respect aisle closures, etc. So we changed the tone of messaging from being factual to being more of respect and responsibility. So now we've got a 2-tone message to the consumer. And that's really helped in terms of the way that consumers behave towards colleagues. And obviously every store's got the full kind of plethora of directional and informational communication. The other thing that Catherine was talking around is the change in hygiene practices, etc., that we all have to kind of implement in store as well. That's great. The key thing is the customers know that you're doing it. So there's a bit around overt communication of what you're doing rather than it just happening in the back of house. So it's all about trust and building the kind of the ongoing trust and the with the consumer between the colleagues. And then what we've done is taken all of those learnings from what we're doing in our company-owned stores and applied that to our retailers. So we've got single group retails as well, and that's been invaluable in the way that we've kind of cascaded that out as well. I think that would be mostly it. I think in terms of the communication side, it's around that respect and clarity of all being in it together. I think it's a change. It's a subtle change in the messaging, which is really important.
And I suppose, do you think there are lessons learned, when we start coming, out the other side of this, and if we ever get back to normal, whatever normal looks like, do you think that has fundamentally changed that communication style? Do you think that will roll through still?
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on what the message is, doesn't it? It depends on what you're trying to communicate. I think it's important that the method is appropriate for the message. I think on that point, to think about from a retailer perspective, we've produced in-depth detail about hygiene, social distancing, communications, big in-depth briefs on how to do it. We're also conscious that most retailers don't sit in an office reading a PC. What they are is they're in front of the customer day in, day out, and the way that they digest information is more mobile phone, it's more small messages, it's more do this, do that, instructional, directional. So go to here to get that, as opposed to here's a pile of stuff that you need to trawl through. So if you, from a retailer perspective, we'll definitely continue to build on that, which is little and often, and much more contained in the way that we communicate.
Brilliant. And you touched, Bill, that communication's two-way. I suppose going back to John, with people looking to remobilise, what do you see from a manufacturer's perspective is critical in terms of understanding that remobilisation plan from a communication?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, obviously we wait for government guidelines, especially around schools and the pub sector, for instance. So we're waiting on that. And as a business, what we're trying to do is communicate largely with our customer base, which has been difficult for everybody. It's a finger in the air saying, yeah, we think this is going to happen. This is going to be the date. So what we've done as a business is really just have a look back before COVID-19 happened. Base our sales around at the moment 50 to 60%, so we've got enough stock in, and just make sure that we've got all our key lines ready to go when our customers are ready to go as well. We've discussed internally here with the director of the business. Basically, we've put money in the pot to do that, because obviously everything has a cost too, more storage and production and things like that. Obviously, when it's not money generated the other end, but long term, we're prepared for people coming back online, whatever that may be. We've got, I think the government situation with the furloughing staff has been helping, because we can pull them back as we need them now. If that hadn't happened, then you'd have to recruit, lay off, recruit. So at the moment, that's working for us quite well. So it's basic, key getting information from customers, and the customers are very similar to what we're talking about today. That there's still a lot of uncertainty around that. So we're basically just trying to ensure that the customers have got key products when their businesses turn back on.
And are you looking to maintain the same amount of products in terms of range? Or are you looking to reduce it? How's that working through?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Bill was saying. I think there's going to be a lot, especially in food service. I think there's going to be a lot of range rationalisation within our sector, as they're talking in the pub sector of using simplified menus, because obviously it's easy to manage and process. So we're looking at the same. I mean, nothing too drastic, to be quite honest. We'll just review once everything's back to whatever the normal is, of where we stand and what the customer's requirements are.
Great, thank you. So I suppose the kind of final couple of points I want to touch on is digital innovation. So obviously, touch points is being something that is being scrutinised at the moment because of infection and cleanliness. So we've seen a lot of increase in cashless sales, new apps coming out, pre-ordering, delivery. I suppose what's next? I think from your perspective, Bill, from the high street, is there anything that's up and coming that we should be aware of that is new and exciting? You're going to give us the golden nugget of Costcutter's innovation strategy for the next couple of years?
You're aware of the silver deals. No, I think, as I think we said before, things are changing rapidly. So if I think about what we've done, you've described cashless increasing rapidly. Obviously, we can't refuse to accept cash, but we can encourage it. We were first to market, I think, in the £45 contactless limit. We've been accelerating last mile and frictionless technology, so scan and go, click and collect, all that kind of different way of shopping. The reality of it, though, is it costs money to do those things. So it's not a zero-sum game unless you start charging for it. So what we're trying to do is work our way through to say, what does good look like from a profitable model? So if customers are looking for delivery, home delivery, then how do you monetize it? How do you capture it? But then how do you kind of make it sustainable? Because you could put a lot of effort into it and then it becomes throw away at the end of this process, and we don't really want that to happen. So we've explored things like partnerships with Uber Eats, partnerships with Happy Shopper, to name a few. We've done local activation with volunteer groups. We've done customer not present, kind of remote payments, kind of improvements in the PED technology. So there's quite a lot of stuff there. I don't think there is a silver bullet, to be honest. It's how do you make money out of all of those things? That's the challenge, as opposed to I think there's enough there at the moment. I wouldn't say there's anything else that we are looking at. The only thing to think about is we still don't have feet on the ground. So all of that was customer based. The thing when you're running a shop is it's all about here and now, looking at the metrics as they happen. So we're accelerating the visibility and the remote access of data for the key shop metrics to allow us to run the shop more effectively, even when we don't have the operation support team in the store. So I suppose we've looked at it from both customer and from an operational point of view. But I don't have a silver bullet to your question.
I'm sure you wouldn't tell me even if you did, but no surprise. I suppose, Denise, I think I was just thinking then, Bill mentioned previously that in terms of helping the flow of the store, they've taken out a lot of dump bins and sell-up opportunities. I suppose from a Coca-Cola perspective, digital and innovation, is there anything in the pipeline from your perspective to help you maintain your levels of sale, grow it where it's possible?
Yeah, so I mean, again, don't ask, we don't have a silver bullet. However, I think what we are finding is it's a lot of the technology was already there. It's just that a lot of people didn't necessarily use it to the best of its capabilities. And there was obviously still quite a lot of hesitance around certain demographics in terms of how and when they adopted that technology. I think anyone, and Bill will probably testify to this as well, in terms of how much more the online shopper occasion has increased. Obviously driven by COVID, but at the end of the day, it's doubled. So it's never moved beyond 7% in the last 5 years, but it's now up to 13%. And 7.8 million households are actually using online delivery for their groceries. That's not going to massively reverse overnight either. So it's how you actually adopt to that. And in terms of how we've looked at that in that environment is we've actually looked at a lot more connections. So for example, when people are shopping, let's take one of the biggest growth areas, alcohol. So when people are shopping alcohol currently, you'll be able to see mixers. So it's given those links that weren't previously there to make sure that people are thinking about it first and foremost when they go in. And it's also important as well as how we consider why it's now working more so, and why you don't just double overnight or triple as Tesco has your online ordering abilities and capabilities if it isn't working. And a lot of it is driven by the fact that there's less promotions in place, that there's higher density of orders, that the average order value is increased, and they're all important to how it evolves in other areas. So then when you look at the aggregators and how much more they've increased, so you're looking at more than 16% in average order value, there's more than 100% increase in different users globally, but there's also a massive increase in bundles. So there's a lot more around the bundle occasion as well. And again, that's something that we could take in. Then if you turn to kind of some of the key brands in GB market and how they've adopted using it as well. And some of these were great users previously, but also some reluctant users of it. So you look at Costa and Nero and how they've actually used that to connect with their consumer. And they've given people a how-to guide on how to produce different bakes and how to produce kind of a coffee experience in the home. You look at M&S, and M&S are working with Deliveroo and doing Father's Day special again, something they previously wouldn't have done. And then you look at the likes of Pret, and they are now doing their first ever bundle deals online. So it's almost how people are using these to connect to different shopper occasions, to connect to the different consumer needs, and such as like saying when you look at how we can adopt and adapt. A lot of it was said previously, so it's about making sure that we use it in the right way. You can use it to accelerate the safety messaging. You can use it to make sure that you get the basics right. So within kind of workplace environments, you can use it massively for click and collect, grab and go, pre-ordering. But what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you get the basics right. Everything's got to be there online and being able to order, and also that you can use it to expand different day parts and also bundling deals. So I guess that's where we're looking to a lot of consumers and a lot of customers in terms of how we can actually help them develop a better online platform so it evolves and it adapts to the consumer demands.
And do you foresee this, I suppose, given the investment, do you foresee this being something that continues for this becoming the new norm?
Yeah, particularly with regards to contactless. I think that now that people have kind of got used to using that more, they have more faith in it, and particularly the older demographic, where previously they would have been hesitant to use it purely from a security perspective, they have now become far more familiar with it. And so I just think it expands out the ability and the approachability for people to actually use it in the marketplace. So it's set to stay in terms of how we can use it in different environments.
Brilliant, thank you. I suppose everyone thinks of innovation as the big brand new shiny thing. I suppose the silver bullet that was teasing Bill about, but I think innovation can be something that's already in place elsewhere but moved into a different environment. So to that point, Catherine, are there any practices, best practice that we've seen in healthcare that we can probably pull across into the new environments and from a consumer perspective?
Yes, I mean, from our point of view, actually, you're quite right. In terms of innovation, it's about actually having products which predominantly have always been focused for healthcare, and you see very much in acute settings, for deep cleans and things like that. And now with this new norm, we're very much seeing this going into public health and the domestic setting. So, for example, with disinfectants, we're actually updating the packaging and instructions so that it can be, for the consumer, you're going to use at home, rather than obviously the quantities and the size and obviously frequency that is used in hospitals. And the challenge we have obviously is meeting that demand. But in addition to that, it's the business of also having looked at some of the areas that have really, I think, been forgotten. So care homes and things, we've brought out new gowns, and also making sure that things like sustainability is not forgotten during a pandemic. You're working very hard to make sure you've got the supplies, but actually not forgetting you're still trying to, with things like we do biodegradable aprons and things like that. That's key, but that's not forgotten. And again, moving from the healthcare setting, we do an awful lot of wipes. And so the individual wipes that people can have in their handbags or in the car, if you're filling up your car at the petrol station, you've got it to hand. And I think that those sorts of things are going to become very much standard. And where you would only have heard before deep cleans in hospitals, I think you will hear people talk about it much more in the domestic setting.
Thank you for that. And I think you touched on probably a really interesting point, that sustainability. I suppose it's a question wider than just to you, Catherine, but sustainability was a bit of a hot topic over the last 6 to 9 months. Do we see this coming back, or do you see that as something that is likely to just fall by the wayside for the time being and then come back later on?
I think it probably has been sidelined, no doubt, question about it. If you hear about all the polythene aprons and gowns and bags that they are, the NHS has sort of, the numbers are just astonishing. But as I said, for us, with biodegradable aprons or whatever it might be, is to make sure that we continue to do that and not get wrapped up in the panic, I suppose. I think it's that element of panic that makes people sort of just say, right, we can't think about that now. But it's going to come back, and we must keep sustainability in view.
Yeah, I see a lot of people nodding. Denise, I mean, has sustainability still been at the top of Coca-Cola's?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, it's always been a hot topic in terms of where we're wanting to evolve, and it's first and foremost in everything we do. And similarly to what Catherine was just saying there, in terms of how we develop sustainable packaging, how we move forward and evolve. So whilst it's not necessarily first and foremost in people's thought processes right now, it is something that we're very acutely aware is still there, and is imperative that we keep that evolving forward with what we do as a business.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. We've covered a lot of ground. Time's flown by this side. I hope it has from your perspective. I think it'd just be good if we could just go a bit of a round robin, really, to just share some final thoughts. So, Sophie, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. So it's been really good. Thanks everyone for answering all of the questions that Ben's posed to you. I think my closing thoughts would be that we all need consumers back. We all want those sales back, and we've all got a duty to make sure that our consumers feel safe. So we've got to remain agile, and we've got to adapt to the needs of our consumers. So yeah, that's it from me.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for participating. Bill?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, absolutely. I think it's fast moving. There is no new norm. The new norm is that there is no new norm. And I think if we grasp hold of that, then we'll succeed. And a lot of it is around the comms and keeping close to consumers and keeping close to colleagues to make sure that they both sets feel safe and secure. And that will encourage a closer relationship, which is something we should absolutely focus on. And I think the packaging side, I think it's a tragedy that everything's stopped in terms of plastic reduction, carrier bags, recyclable cups and reusable cups. That pressure will come back, but what does that look like in a COVID world? So there's an opportunity, or there's something else that needs to be done in that space as well. So fast moving, but you know, we're still going.
You guys are used to fast moving retail, I suppose. So it's just a different speed, maybe.
Different fast.
Different fast. Thanks for your participation, Bill. It's really appreciated. John?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm coming from a different perspective. So obviously, being a food service processor, I think there's going to be a lot of changes within the food service sector. There's going to be quite a bit of downside, I think, initially, regarding redundancies and things like that, which will be a shame. I think a little topic you spoke about, SKU reduction, I think is going to be that across the whole sector. But then I feel within 18 months, I think we'll plateau, and then I think we'll build on that and on our strengths and take the positives away from this, because there will be some positives, like the retail sector we're experiencing. I think food service has got a lot to do to catch up with that and innovation and things like that. So I think short term, I think we're in for a bit of a rough ride into food service in production, and we'll manage accordingly. But then there'll be green shoots like everything. I mean, if we all remember the Brexit negotiations and discussions, the world was going to crash around us, and we move on from that, hopefully. So a little dark and then some sunshine at the end of it.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate your input, and thanks for reminding us about Brexit. I think we've gone all of 3 months without it being mentioned, so it's appreciated. Catherine?
I think for me, I'm coming from a different angle again, and I think planning, because we need to learn from the mistakes from the start of this pandemic. We all got caught short with not enough PPE. That's the first bit. And as Sophie quite rightly said, the consumer is key. You want to get the consumer back. So for confidence and to ensure that it doesn't impact, because we will have a second wave undoubtedly, to reduce the impact on business is to make sure that you have got everyone is responsible for having in place PPE and making sure you're all doing it, but that we actually, it's not just suppliers and manufacturers' responsibility. It's got to be all sort of sites say, we know that we have in place, so that for the consumer will feel confident and your staff will feel confident. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. It's not just the consumer that needs to feel that. It needs to be radiated by the staff. So I think that's a really important point. Thank you for your input today, Catherine. It's really appreciated again. Denise?
Yeah, I think I'm probably just going to end up accumulating everything that people have said. However, I think for us, it's that, and most importantly for us as a business, is that we put our people first, and health and safety remains at the heart of everything we do, not just for our employees, but also for our customers and consumers. We said this before as well, that we actually remain agile and adaptable. That is going to be absolutely crucial moving forward in terms of the ever-evolving changing consumer demands, but that we learn and evolve as well, which is going to be critical. And I think, again, that's probably just summarising in a slightly different way everything that people have just said.
Yeah, no, it is a really appreciated, it's a really good insight you provided from Coke, which is really built on the conversation. So thank you very much. So I suppose just a big thank you to all the panelists from myself for being so engaged in the conversation, and thanks to everyone else who's downloaded the session and listened to it. We hope you found it insightful and you've got some good perspectives to take away for your businesses around consumer confidence and social distancing. If you do have any feedback or some questions, please feel free to email us at info@foodbuy.co.uk. But yeah, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time for the next Foodbuy Futures session. Thank you.